Hello. Thought I'd do a really quick video about floating on the back, since I'm actually earlier for my lesson than I thought. What's time? Yeah, I got a bit of time. So let's take this off actually. Whew, quite hot in here. Get some aircon on. So the back float. Now, a lot of people will think the back float is safer, as lots of life-saving enthusiasts will tell you. Can't speak today. And technically it is, because you are breathing. So that's one massive advantage to floating on your back, is you can breathe. However, it is not as, I don't think it's as safe to learn as floating on your front. So when I teach, I always teach floating on the front first, at least, like as in end goal, floating without anything. It depends on the person, I suppose. But the reason I do it front first is because on the back, inevitably, when you get it wrong, which you probably will if you're practicing by yourself, you're going to get water over your face, you're going to submerge. So if you've been practicing on the front submerging and get comfortable going underwater, and you know, like on my last video, not panicking when you're going underwater, then when it happens, you're not going to panic, you're not going to freak out. So, but on your back, okay, there's a few things is a bit sketchy about going on your back. One is you don't know where you are. You have no idea where you are in the pool. There's not many reference points on the ceiling. You can drift quite easily. You can drift away from the wall. You can drift towards the wall. So you'll be on your back, and then 1 minute, crack, ouch, you smash your head or smash something on the side of the pool because you've been drifting. Or I've seen this because when I used to lifeguard, I used to see this all the time. They'll be swimming or floating or whatever on their back, and they'll drift into deeper water, and they'll think, oh right, I'm going to stand up now, and whoops, they can't stand up because there is no floor there to stand up on, because it's out of their depth because they're floating too much. And then they go into panic mode, blah blah blah, help me, reach pole. So I'm not saying floating on your back is a bad thing, it's not. But I just wanted to kind of get that across, because everyone assumes it's going to be safer, but it isn't. Also, if people are splashing around in the pool, you're not the only person. There's going to be swell in the pool, so the water's going to be moving around. And if you're on your back, it only takes a little bit of swell to go poof and wash over your face. Again, not a nice feeling as a beginner. Not a nice feeling as an experienced swimmer either. No one likes getting water on their face on their back. It's just not nice. It's just not a nice feeling, really. So a couple of mistakes a lot of people will make on the back is probably the number one is probably lifting the legs, in my opinion, because I don't really need to talk about ears in the water, because most people know that. Ears in the water, yes. Tummy up, yes. But if you lift your legs, okay, never lift your legs in swimming. Never lift your legs. The only time you want to lift your legs in anything in the pool, and let me think about this carefully quick, just run through everything, is a somersault or a handstand or a surface dive, which handstand and surface dive are basically the same position, so technically that's one thing. But yeah, apart from that, you do not want to lift your legs. If you lift your legs, something else will give. So on the back, if you lift the legs up, okay, the hips will go down, and the hips going down is even worse than the legs going down. Why? Because the hips are in the center of your body. So if the hips go down, it's connected to your stomach and then your chest, so that will go down, and then eventually your head will go under the water, and then your legs will go down anyway because your hips are in the center. So you know, why people were telling people to lift their legs, I don't know. Probably because they have a body type where they have enough I don't want to be rude, but enough sort of fat on their legs so their legs do naturally float, or they're a lot more fat on their hips or something, or whatever. They float better than me and a lot of skinny people, basically. So therefore, when they lift their legs, the hips won't go down as much because there's more buoyancy there. It still happens, but they probably don't realise it as much. So yeah, don't lift your legs when you're on your back. Do not lift your legs. If your legs are sinking underwater, okay, let them sink. Let your knees bend. Let your ankles sink. Like let your, you know what I mean, from your knees to your foot. Let that sink. Okay, because your thigh's probably going to float. Most people, their thigh floats. Even mine do. But like from your knee down to your foot, so your whole kind of shin, that might kind of drop a little bit unless you try and straighten your leg. Which is again, that's why I don't like star floats, because they force you to keep everything up, which you shouldn't. If you want to learn to float, right, and you want to be relaxed, a star float isn't relaxing, in my opinion. Not really, because you're trying to keep everything on the surface of the water, and because you're trying to keep everything on the surface of the water, then that means you're I wouldn't say tensing your muscles, but you're rigid. You're in a certain position, and then in your mind you're going to think, oh, unless I'm in this position, I will not float, or unless I'm in a pencil float, I will not float, or unless I'm in a mushroom float, I will not float. I need to adopt position A, position B, position C in order to float, because that's what videos say. No. You could have your hands in your pockets, I don't know, one hand in your pocket and pick your nose, and you'll still float. Okay? Floating has got nothing to do, well, actually, I use this lightly, it has got a little bit to do with your body position because they kind of intertwine, but you can float in basically any position. There's a float called the standing float or vertical float, which maybe I'll cover in another video. And your position is like this. You're vertical in the water, which, by the way, is the worst possible floating position you can possibly be in, because you're streamlining yourself, but you're not streamlining yourself this way. You're streamlining yourself this way. So technically, it's the best possible position to sink. If you've ever heard or seen people do pencil jumps, that is exactly the same. The only difference is a pencil jump is they jump in that position and go under the water and then float up, whereas a vertical float is you're just in the water like this. But the position is exactly the same, and you will still, as long as you've got enough air in your lungs, you will still float even in that position. Okay? So when you see videos of people saying you must look down to the bottom, or on the front, or you must look up to the ceiling on your back, that is purely front and back. That's not just floating. Okay, floating is not just front and back. There's a lot more to floating than there is front and back. You can float upside down with your legs crossed, so it looks like if you turn the camera upside down like this, it looks like you're sitting on the surface but under the water. You Google it, you'll see there'll be a picture of some man or woman, and they'll have their legs crossed and they're upside down floating, so their bum is kind of sitting like, say this is the surface of the water, the ceiling here, their bum is here and their head is down here, so they're upside down, but because the camera's upside down, it looks like they're sitting on the surface of the water underwater, if that makes sense. Yeah, the only thing about that is it sucks because the water will go up your nose more, because when you go upside down the water will go up your nose, but it's still floating. But anyway, I'm getting a bit sidetracked. So yeah, on the back, yeah, you just want to be nice and low. You can start by the wall. Also, don't push off as well. A lot of people will tend to push off the wall and try and use the momentum. If you do that, you're probably going to push up, and therefore gravity is going to kick in, and then you're going to go down. You want to just let go of the wall, okay, but do not let go of the wall unless you feel like your entire weight is being supported by the water. If you feel like there's any kind of tension at all in your weight in the water, then there is, which means when you let go, you're going to go underwater. Yes, you'll float underwater, but you won't be in your position to breathe, which is the whole point of going on your back. So you can start by having, excuse me, another thing about why I don't like going on the back as much in terms of teaching is because a lot of people will say, this is how you float on your back, you do this, this and this, and they'll say lift the legs, which I've already explained is a load of rubbish, but then they don't teach you how to stand up. And standing up is pretty important on front and back, and standing up from the back is a bit harder than standing up on the front. So unless you've got a wall or something to hang on to, unless you understand about hip position and stuff like that, then standing up's pretty hard, and it's actually pretty scary the first time you do it on your back. So there's two ways of doing it. You can either have both hands on the wall. If you think you're comfortable standing up, you can have both hands on the wall and gently float away from the wall on your back. Notice how I say float away from the wall, not push away from the wall, just float away from the wall. So you let go, okay, and then you just gently float away from the wall. Or you can have, I don't really like this method, but it is easier to stand up. You have one hand on the side of the pool, okay, the other hand under the water, not on top of the water, under the water. You lay back and do it that way, and then when you want to stand up, you use this hand to help sort of pull you up. But you'll kind of feel like with that one, your elbow's going to kind of go against the side like this, especially because as a beginners are tense, right? And what do when they're tense? They will pull like this, right? They'll pull the close to the wall, and they'll go like this, and the elbow will drop, and this shoulder will be lower than this one. So they'll be on their back, but they'll be like this on their back. So they'll be at an angle, not because of necessarily what they're doing in terms of their technique of floating, because of what they're holding on to. But it does help you stand up. So there's pros and cons to both, I suppose. But yeah, it's very difficult to teach about standing up without actually showing you in a pool. But maybe I'll do that in another video. Any questions about going on the back? Not necessarily floating, to do with the stroke, to do with kicking, to do with the arm pull, arm recovery, just how to avoid bashing into walls and stuff like that. Let me know in the comments.